welcome to my channel on the best of fantasy. This is the week that was. And it's been a relatively quiet week on the channel, but I have some very exciting things coming up that I am eager to tell you all about. I only had one video on the channel this week, but that is because I've been busy with work and with, more excitingly, writing. So yeah, the writing's been going really well, and I'm sure many of you can relate. When it's going well, you just got to go with it. So that has been a lot of fun. I anticipate that I'll be finishing the revision of book 2 of my trilogy by mid-March, and then I'll be handing off books 1 and 2 to my agent, and we shall see what happens after that. So I'm very excited about that, and I'm also really happy with what I've been reading lately, having a great time in the, getting toward the end of Dust of Dreams by Stephen Erickson, book 9 of the Malazan Book of the Fallen. And it is everything that I remembered and more from my first read, because it is, of course, a reread. Just a tremendous book, wonderful experience, and I am savoring every moment of this. And as soon as AP is done, the two of us will have our usual get-together to do our non-spoiler discussion of the book on my channel, spoilers on his, and who knows what we'll do, but there's a lot of exciting Malazan stuff coming up that we have already recorded. Really good stuff coming up now that will be coming out mostly on his channel on A Critical Dragon. So that I am very excited about. And once I finish with Dust of Dreams, I will dive right into An Autumn War to keep up with the Long Price Quartet group that I've been with, having a great time with that, and I'm excited to get to book 3 of the Long Price Quartet. This has been a great series so far for me. So I've said many times how impressed I am with Daniel Abraham's writing. So yeah, lots of fun stuff in terms of my reading life, and so I'm really happy about that. But that one video that I mentioned before on the channel was a Malazan video. Specifically, it was a video on Song of Dreaming. This is a poem from Dust of Dreams. It's an epigraph poem, and it is something that I discussed with AP from A Critical Dragon. And we had, I think, a really fascinating discussion about this poem, which is, I think, a wonderful example of how affirmative and full of hope and how peaceful and beautiful the Malazan books can be. I think a lot of times people focus on the grim stuff, on the suffering, and those things do exist. I mean, they exist in life, right? So they exist in great literature as well, which must, I think, of necessity reflect life and human experience. But I think that it's very important to focus on the affirmative aspects of the Malazan Book of the Fallen, which I do not see as a grimdark series at all, because of things like this poem, Song of Dreaming, and where the series ultimately goes. I think that this is a wonderful answer. This is giving answer to the suffering, and this is a very important aspect. If you did not take this aspect of the series into account, you'd be missing, I think, maybe the most important fundamental thing about the Malazan Book of the Fallen. And it does, as in Stephen Donaldson's words, it delivers reintegration, in my opinion. But this poem, Song of Dreaming, is a wonderful illustration of just that. The idea that we can look at something like bereavement, like grieving, like death, with a sense of beauty and peace and acceptance and affirmation and even hope. I think it's just so profoundly wonderful. And so it was a very positive experience for me to discuss this poem with AP and to hear the reactions, to see the reactions in the comments from many of the viewers, some of whom expressed that they have experienced recent bereavement, the loss of a loved one, and they find this poem incredibly comforting. So that was really moving to me, actually, even though it wasn't, like usual, the Malazan poems are not the most viewed things on my channel, but the fact is I find them so worth delving into, because the people who do watch the videos seem to really, really appreciate them. these poems are profoundly moving and fascinating for me. And so I'm so glad that we did that discussion and that I was able to read the comments from people. So I was very touched by that, actually. So yeah, that was a great thing that happened on my channel for the week. And I did some things elsewhere as well. So a week ago, I was on the Fantasy Network with Jimmy and Joanna and Alan and Andy and AP. Oh, what? It was a Malazan convergence because Jimmy was discussing with the rest of us his finishing of the series, the Malazan Book of the Fallen. And he had finished The Crippled God, and this was our swan song to his Malazan read, if you will. I'm sure he'll be doing lots more Malazan stuff in the future. In fact, I think he's already rereading the series. Another great thing is that Steven Erickson also showed up in the chat while we were having that discussion on The Crippled God. So it was really quite a marvelous time with him and with everybody else in the chat. It's just wonderful people who've been following along with Jimmy's Malazan journey and I think encouraging him in some beautiful ways. So that was a lot of fun. Great times on BookTube. So I'm really happy that Jimmy invited me to be part of all of this. It was a very meaningful experience for me. And elsewhere also, I was on a Critical Dragon. Speaking of the devil, or the dragon in this case, AP's channel, I was in a discussion with him about, I mentioned Stephen Donaldson's essays just a moment ago, and AP and I had a further discussion of Donaldson's essays on epic fantasy and what epic fantasy can do, including the idea of reintegration. That was another really fantastic chat with AP, with Professor Fireballs, who had some illuminating things to say about Donaldson's essays, and it's just always such a pleasure and a joy to talk with him. And I had even walked away from that with an even greater understanding, I think, of what Donaldson was doing in those essays and what epic fantasy can do. We are in a wonderful genre that is incredibly helpful to us in our real lives, I think. I believe that firmly. And it's a beautiful thing to celebrate and to discuss. So I would encourage, if anyone hasn't gone out and read Donaldson's essays, I think they're not very long, actually. So they're an easy, quick read, but they are, I think, very important in terms of the assertion of what epic fantasy can do. And of course, there are lots of different kinds of fantasy, lots of different things you can do with the genre. So there's not to say you have to do any one thing with it, you know. So what else is going on here? Well, upcoming, there's a lot of exciting things going on. And one of them is that I have been rereading, that is, Tolkien's essay on fairy stories. I have it here in this collection called The Tolkien Reader. Among other things, there's some Tom Bombadil stuff in here and a lot of fun things, some great commentary. But Tolkien's essay on fairy stories was collected in here, along with this sort of companion piece, Leaf by Niggle. At least Tolkien paired the two. And I would like to sort of share my thoughts on Tolkien's essay on fairy stories. I've been doing some videos on various important foundational essays for the fantasy genre. And among them, of course, Ursula Le Guin's From Elfland to Poughkeepsie, and I just mentioned Stephen Donaldson's essays. And of course, I need to talk about Tolkien's essay on fairy stories. It is, like so many other things Tolkien did, foundational for the genre. So when you think of fantasy, I think most minds will go straight to Tolkien. He was though he didn't invent the genre by any means, he is a vastly influential figure on the genre. In a similar manner, I believe that he has been vastly influential on how we think about fantasy, and his essay on fairy stories is sort of the foundation of all of that. I mean, it is an essay that has had great influence on the way many people think about the genre. It's the essay where he introduces all kinds of concepts. He talks about imagination and art and sub-creation. He talks about fantasy before the word was even used to describe the genre. He talks about arresting strangeness. He talks about recovery and escape and consolation. And of course, he talks about eucatastrophe. These are all very famous, well-known concepts that he introduces in this very important essay on fairy stories. So I'm going to I've finished reading it, and I'm going to let my thoughts sort of steep a little bit here in the essay, and I'm going to eventually make a video which I believe will be out next Thursday on this amazingly important essay on fairy stories. And I think eventually, too, I'll probably do a video on the companion piece, Leaf by Niggle, because it's a lot of fun. And it, in Tolkien's mind, was a companion piece to the essay on fairy stories. And so I believe he's saying something important in Leaf by Niggle as well. So I'll do that. And in the future, I also plan to do a video on Tolkien's monumental, foundational essay about Beowulf. So as much as Tolkien is a foundational figure for fantasy, as much as he is a foundational figure for how we think about fantasy, he was also a scholar of Old English, and his essay, Beowulf, the Monsters and the Critics, is probably, it's safe to say, the most important essay ever written on the poem, because Tolkien introduced an era of critical exploration of the poem that regarded Beowulf as a work of literature. And so it's you can't exaggerate the importance of the guy in this respect as well. So, and because I'm doing the Read with Mike from Mike's Book Reviews on Tolkien's translation of Beowulf, I think it's very appropriate for me to delve into Tolkien's most influential essay on the poem as well, which does not appear. I'm kind of disappointed they didn't put Tolkien's essay, Beowulf, the Monsters and the Critics, in this. They've got his translation, they've got some commentary in here, but they didn't include that essay, unfortunately. But I have it elsewhere, and it's something that you can find online as well, I'm pretty sure. So that is another thing for the future that I will be doing. So having a bit of nostalgia here for Tolkien, and he was certainly a figure who influenced me in ways that I've talked about many times on the channel, but I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that my life turned out the way it did in many ways because of Tolkien's influence, and my interests were a product of reading Lord of the Rings when I was 12, 13 years old, and trying in my own clumsy way to follow in his footsteps on that adventure that he opened up. He opened the door to a world and to worlds for me, and I've been sort of exploring ever since. So as much as Tolkien's essays have been vastly influential for the genre, they've also been very influential for me on a personal level. So I have a lot of fun talking about them as well. And what else is going on? Well, I mentioned the Beowulf discussion with Mike. That's going to be happening, I believe, sometime toward the end of February, so relatively soon. And also, on the day that this video comes out, Saturday, I will be in a Malazan discussion at 11 o'clock Eastern Time. That's 5 hours behind Greenwich Mean Time. And that's going to be on Steve's channel, Steve Talks Books. So he and a group of other booktubers are reading Gardens of the Moon. They are starting their Malazan journey, and Steve very graciously invited me to participate. So on this very day when you are watching this video, perhaps at 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time, that discussion will be taking place. It's going to be a live stream, and it will include not only Steve and myself, but Joseph Carroll and Yolene Reads, and Cersei's booked, and Stacy's all booked. So quite a great lineup, and I am excited not only to talk about Gardens of the Moon, but to meet these wonderful booktubers and have a chance to talk to them live. So that's going to be a lot of fun, and I hope if you can that you will tune in and be there. If you're a Malazan veteran, be there perhaps to support these people who are just beginning their Malazan journeys. So, and another very exciting thing that I am ready for is the next episode of Dear Dr. Fantasy. And that is going to be with Patrick Leo. And I've announced this already, but we are scheduled to talk this weekend, and the video I am planning to release on Tuesday. So the next episode of Dear Dr. Fantasy will be out on Tuesday. Going to have I anticipate a great time just mining the brain of Patrick Leo, who is one of the most well-read persons in the fantasy genre that I know, and somebody that we all respect here on BookTube, and a very influential person on Goodreads. I think it's fair to call him the king of Goodreads. So it's going to be a lot of fun talking with Patrick and getting to know him a little bit better. He's somebody that I am looking forward to asking some questions, and maybe he'll ask me some questions too. We'll see where the conversation goes. And of course, I've already announced this, but I'm also incredibly excited for the next episode of Dear Dr. Fantasy, which will be with Alan from the Library of Alexandria. So that one is going to be full of fireworks, I am sure, because Alan and I, we love to talk about lots of things, from fantasy to education to who knows what will come up. But I'm so looking forward to having that chat with my buddy Alan. So lots of really exciting, wonderful things on the horizon here, and I hope you'll be able to join me for some of them. Until next time.